Good afternoon, Your Highnesses, Excellencies and Dignitaries, members of the ABLF network, and all of our wonderful guests here with us today. My name is Resham Katecha. I'm a strategy and policy specialist based in the UK, and as ever, I am delighted to be here at the ABLF with their typical lineup of fantastic business leaders. I'm really delighted to be able to introduce to you Mr. Sridhar Vembu, who co-founded Zoho Corporation in 1996 and has been the CEO since 2000. The company has emerged as the largest software product company in India, all driven by a holistic philosophy that puts contentment and humility as its key virtues. Mr. Vembu is well known for building a multi-million-dollar corporation from scratch without taking any external funding that today competes directly with those famous giants like Microsoft, Google, Oracle, and Salesforce, and proud to say that he is giving them all a run for their money. The company now has set their eyes on the Indian market, where it perceives India to be a multi-billion-dollar market where the cloud is going to be a big opportunity for them. It has plans to sign up 1 million enterprises in the next 3 years, and to achieve that, Zoho, as part of their strategy, will be intensifying its marketing and sales in the country. So there's a lot to talk about, but Sridhar, before we start on your strategy, you've previously said that Zoho has been built on values and conviction, that whilst your success in numbers is magnificent, that you actually measure your success through impact. So can you elaborate a little bit on your ethos and your purpose and explain how you think this has impacted your working and contributed to your success?
First of all, thank you for having me. Namaskar. Our purpose in Zoho has been to serve the unserved in terms of both markets, our employees, customers, all of it. So we try to find ways to serve the unserved or underserved, both in terms of our recruitment and our customers, all of it. And we do that by keeping our products affordable, by investing in training for our employees all around, and investing in skill creation, and also supporting the communities where we operate. So all of that is how we have tried to live our own values. And to enable this, we have kept the company private, entirely private. We have not actually taken it public, so that we can actually fully serve one master, which is our own conscience, rather than an external financial investor, which always creates a conflict.
Wow, I love that, serving one master, your conscience. And you are, of course, running a globally successful, globally known business from India. So what do you think the future of globalization is, and how has the impact of the pandemic shaped or changed your view of the business world?
Globalization has long, even before the pandemic, there have been challenges. And the global financial crisis of 2008-9 already posed serious test to the system, which it barely survived. I mean, thanks to a lot of the monetary operations worldwide, the system survived, but and the damage from that is what later led to the pandemic-related disruptions as well. And if you go back and look at what is the cause of these, the challenges to globalization, I would say it's mounting imbalances around the world. You have countries that are huge exporters, you have countries that are importers, and that balance, for example, China is a major exporter, Germany is a major exporter, US is a big importer, India is a big importer. These imbalances have been mounting, have been going bigger and bigger. And recently, for example, Turkey has gone through an economic financial crisis in the last few months. And that also is because of the imbalances. And so this pretty much, these imbalances are global in scope. It is there within the EU, it is there across the world. And EU, we saw events from Greece, Italy, a lot of those crises before. That was several years ago. So globalization has been lurching from one problem to another, and all papered over by the central banks. That has been the last decade or 2 decades trend. And so some kind of a serious correction is overdue, and the pandemic simply exposed all of those underlying stresses in the system. And what I expect to happen is you have to bring the system back into balance. You have to bring exports and imports into balance, which will seem like countries are going their own way, but it's really that they want to bring the economies into balance. I think that is what the trend is going to be.
I think there's so much value in that about bringing the economy into balance. But unfortunately, what tends to happen after economic crisis is protectionism and a pull away from globalization. And so how do you view that risk of economic protectionism? And do you see a difference in the rising trend of protectionism when you think about your Asian markets compared to your Western markets?
Yeah, definitely there has been more of self-reliance policies that could get called protectionism. For example, even the US now in the semiconductor sector has emphasized more self-reliance rather than relying on imports for majority of its chips. And this is a global trend. I don't believe that it's going to abate. And the reason for that is the severe imbalances between supply and demand. Like some countries have all the supply, some countries have all the demand. And then that has consequences of jobs, consequences for debt. All of these things play a role in this. That is why it's important that the system be brought back into balance. And in the short run, the balancing acts may appear like protectionism, because that's the only way that countries will have to discourage certain imports and encourage more exports, and that will appear like protectionism. But severely indebted countries, Sri Lanka is a good example, where they have massive debt, more than 100% of GDP debt to foreign debtors, and they need to boost their domestic, their exports and cut down imports. That will again look like protectionism when such actions are taken. But they are the inevitable consequence of the previous era of debt that happened. So we cannot just look at the protectionism in isolation. We have to look at what happened before these mounting imbalances.
Of course, very wise to look at the bigger picture. And thinking about that bigger picture, what do you think or hope the next step should be for both the government and the private sector in order to propel us out of a possible recession, replenish international trade, and kind of recover some of that economic loss from the last year in pandemic?
Yeah, it's really, you have to look at it country by country, the context of the country that determines it. A large country like India, it has one set of policy choices. Heavily trade dependent and investment or finance dependent nations like UAE have a different set of choices they face. For example, when you are a trade dependent nation, you have to look at how do you, the trading system, when people go more protectionist, how does a trading nation cope? Those are the kinds of questions that are faced in the UAE. That means, again, encouraging more domestic production to match domestic consumption will become the norm everywhere. So you'll invite people to set up factories and production facilities all over the world. I think that is a trend we are going to see. And the government should be looking at employment and social equity. That's an important aspect. And around the world, we are seeing this, and where inequality has gone up too much around the world in the last 2 decades. And it can no longer, and that's causing a social explosion of sorts. And so governments have to pay particular attention to this. And these are directly linked to trade policy. For example, there's this book, Trade Wars or Class Wars. And that book delineates the connection between trade policy, external trade policy, and domestic class, where between the production workers versus the services workers, the tradable sector versus the non-tradable sector. These kinds of things become class issues within countries. So there is direct links between the two, and governments will have to pay attention to these issues primarily.
And I just want to pick up on, you talked about the need for, obviously each country and within that regions having different needs. And you yourself have talked about the benefit of transnational localism. So can you expand a little bit on what that is and what the perceived benefits and challenges are of that sort of way of thinking and working?
Yeah. Transnational localism is a philosophy we came up with to navigate this new world, post-globalization, where countries are going to want to match local production and local consumption. And this really means there is 2 aspects to it. There is localism, that means a lot more local activities, local production, local employment to match the local demand. And the second aspect is the transnational aspect, and where we share knowledge and best practices around the world. So our own offices, for example, we have in UAE, we have in London, we have all over the world now. We have over 25, 30 offices around the world now and expanding rapidly. Each of these will have a lot more local autonomy, focus on local employment, push as many of the responsibility to that local subsidiary level. That's what they're doing. So it'll be rooted. Our subsidiary will be rooted in the local region, and it'll be connected globally. And that is the rooted is a localism, connected is a transnational part. So it's rooted and connected. That is the strategy that we are pursuing. And the idea here is when we do business in a country, we are not only selling, but we are also looking at how to create employment there, how to create enough local know-how capabilities so that we help the region build economic resiliency. You're not just merchants, but you're also active participants in the economic resiliency of a region. That is the philosophy of transnational localism.
Well, sticking to that philosophy, I'm going to take a second to introduce Aman Shah. So as part of the ABLF Knowledge Partnership with the American University of Sharjah, we have a really brilliant student, Aman Shah, who has a question for you. And I think this is the perfect moment to introduce him and to give him the time to ask this question. So Aman, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Aman, and I'm an undergraduate student at the American University of Sharjah. I'm really excited to be here at the ABLF, and I'm glad I have a chance to ask my question. So, Mr. Vembu, I hope you're doing well. My question to you is, do you think the pandemic and globalization would more likely lead to corporations looking to hire people from other countries and recognize global talent? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely there is the marketplace for talent is increasingly globalized, and which anybody in India can see it, where Indian talent is all over the world now, and similar things are happening around the world now. So that, given that, and there's also given the need to create local jobs, governments have a interesting balancing act here. They want to create local jobs, but they also want to get talent from wherever, because those local jobs often depend on getting the know-how and the talent as catalysts to create those local jobs. Silicon Valley is a classic example. There's a lot of jobs in Silicon Valley, but it also depends on immigrant talent to create those companies, create those startups. This is something a lot of governments will discover, and UAE, of course, is particularly good at doing this. And so that is where I believe that you're going to have the connectivity, the connection between the localism and the transnational part. That's important, rooted and connected. That's how I say it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aman, for that really insightful question. And so picking up on that, because I know you, of course, have had experience working across territories and continents, you are not the only person who recognises that there is huge growth potential in India, and a number of foreign companies are looking at aggressively expanding in India, while the country itself and its policies seem to be focused much more on self-reliance. So what do you think the impact of these moves will be in the longer term?
Repeat the question. I lost a little bit of it.
Sure, sorry. Just that a number of foreign companies are looking at expanding aggressively in India, whereas India's policies seem to be focused on self-reliance. And of course, you've talked about that balancing act. What impact do you see this having in India in the short and medium term?
Yeah, India's policy of Atmanirbhar, self-reliance, is really about balancing the trade that I talked about, where the trade became very imbalanced, and it's about balancing it, creating more manufacturing in India, creating more jobs in India. And this is similar policies now incoming Biden administration in the US has also been pursuing in semiconductor and other sectors as well. So you are going to see, and this is similar, you're going to see this in the UK, where the manufacturing sector post-Brexit will be rebuilt. Okay, so you are going to see this around the world. But this does not mean an end to global trading. It just means a more balanced trade, rather than this countries having to run up massive deficits against other countries, and other countries have massive surpluses on the other side. And then you have financial flows that destabilize countries. So those are the things that I think will be challenged. But in the Indian context, India is still a very open, vast economy. It's very welcoming to foreign investors. So there's massive investment opportunities. It's just that the Indian government is now asking the companies to also match local production to local consumption. Foreign investors are welcome, but please match local production to local consumption. I think that is where it is heading around the world, not just in India.
Thank you so much. And you spoke earlier, and I want to pick back up on that point. You spoke about economic recovery, and most people see technology, and of course, I assume you do too, given your business, technology being a key factor in recovery and in growth. So what should be done to improve the access, the operations, and inclusivity to digital services to enable people to really leverage that opportunity?
Yeah, this is something that is near and dear to us in Zoho. We want our workforce to be drawn from a broad pool of population, a representative pool, so that we create opportunity. And we don't just draw from a digital elite, but also expand the opportunity. So this requires a lot of investment in skill building, and that is something Zoho has been doing. And this is something governments are taking note of, and governments are now going to create these private-public partnerships for skill building in various economies, and ask companies, multinational companies, to come in and be part of these skill building initiatives. And the second part that I expect to happen in this is you are going to create strong local employment incentives, which many countries now have, and that you are going to see that also go up. And coming to the digital, particularly the digital thing, this is clearly, it's the digital tools, the cloud that enables the global connectivity, okay, that we are connected, and we are on the Zoom call, and we are connecting from all around the world now. And that is a huge benefit. But at the same time, we cannot lose sight of the fact that there are people on the other side of the tracks, so to speak, who need the opportunity, who need the leg up, and they need to be brought into this digital era. And that's a priority for governments, because governments often, they are answerable to their public that they serve. So it's not just for up to companies, but the governments should get involved in this. So you are going to see a lot of these skill building initiatives around the world, and that's what will define the new era.
I'd love you to tell us a bit more about that, because you not only talk about creating opportunity, but you actually work yourself to create and provide that opportunity. So you launched what you called a rural school startup to provide free food and education. You've said it's a model that doesn't believe in marks or degrees or conventional certificates. So tell us all about that, because that sounds absolutely fascinating and a real way to live what you preach.
Yeah, I moved myself to a small village here in the southern part of India, and it's a typical village with mostly agriculture, predominantly agricultural. And I noticed that the children here, they are eager for an opportunity, and they want, if you provide a good education, good environment, they can shine. So I decided to start a school here, and that has been now about 120 kids, and it's going well. And we are expanding that now, and we are also going to expand the similar initiatives in other rural parts of India as well. That's something that's under consideration right now. So the lesson we are learning here is, in spite of all the efforts, there is still a gap in terms of very rural kids getting that first step in the ladder. They're still leaving a lot of rural kids behind. And that is why I am so keen to play a part in this. And I believe other corporations, other companies will want to do this, because the benefit for them, what's in it for the companies, eventually this is the demographic that will become part of the workforce, that will enter the workforce in 10, 12 years. So investing now creates the skills, and it's actually the cheap way to ensure that you have actually good talent available, because there's no point at the point of consumption saying I don't have enough talent available. It becomes a very expensive problem to solve, and it's often impossible to solve. But if they intervene early, the overall investment required is actually less, and you get higher quality talent, and that directly plays a role in terms of how productive the workforce is and how creative the workforce is, and therefore in terms of GDP and profits, all of that. So it's vital to do this, and it's of course a great humanitarian thing to do, but the region's future, the country's future, all are tied up in this as well.
Of course, make the most of our human capital while tackling that disparity. And a lot's been written about that move to the rural area. and the transformation you've made with technology. What are the lessons that you've learned from that experience, and what would you share with others looking to, whether for their own purposes or for the good of humanity, want to do the same?
Yeah, I would say the benefits of moving to rural areas are manifold. You have today, particularly in the post-pandemic world, social distancing is easier than in big cities, and the pandemic has not had as severe an impact in these rural areas. That's true, I think, pretty much all of rural India. The impact is much more muted than in big cities. Naturally, because people are just naturally more socially distanced here. You don't even have to try hard. And the second, of course, I mentioned the talent pool, the demographics. Rural citizens tend to have more children, and that directly plays a role in where the future workforce is going to come from. So for companies to go where the workforce is actually a very smart move. Not only it's a philanthropic move, but it's also a business savvy move. And third, of course, real estate costs are much lower in rural areas. That directly plays a role in terms of your cost of operations, all of that, profitability, all of that. So it's not only a charitable move, but it's also actually a smart business move. I think many companies should consider this move.
Great. Well, let's hope all the business leaders listening today take heed of that advice. And I want to come back to, you said it's a smart business move. There are very few examples of leading companies, especially in tech, like Zoho, coming directly out of India. What would your advice be to Indian entrepreneurs to stay ahead of the curve, and how they can build such industry-leading tech companies?
Yeah. So the primary thing is to focus on specific market segments and excel, because to play in global markets, you have to be competitive with the leading products in those markets, and absolute focus and a commitment to that market, so that you have to, when you put down roots, when you say, we are here, put our stake down and say, this is where we are going to stay, we are going to fight this. It may take 5 years, 7 years, we'll get this right. That is important. Because often when you come from India and you don't have the talent pool to get this right, and you might get dejected at first, but over the long haul, staying focused actually really pays off. That is what I think is important in this. And the second, of course, investing in the technology know-how always pays off long term. So these are the things that I will advise Indian companies to do.
That's great. And just sticking to that in terms of your advice, Zoho, of course, has competed with some really established and world famous brands, and also has to deal with newer stage tech competitors entering the market. How do you deal with that? How do you stay ahead of the competition? And how do you make sure that you are not succumbing to focusing so much on your competitors that you lose sight of your own focus and achievements?
Yeah, definitely. You cannot keep focusing on the competition. You have to actually focus on the customers, keeping the customers happy. And competition only matters in the sense that you have to understand customer preferences. Why do they choose our product versus the other product? Why do they not choose us? These are the kinds of questions we want to be asking, and understand the customer preference. And then once we have a customer, make sure that they're happy, take care of them well. These are the things that the table stakes for any company. And beyond that, in technology market, there are some natural barriers to entry. When some products are well entrenched, it's hard to displace them. So new companies that come up have to take that into account. Which markets are easier to enter? Where are the opportunities? These require careful calculation to enter, and that's important as well.
Sridhar, I'm sure I'm not the only person listening to you speak who wishes we had more time to pick your brains and hear your insights, but I'm afraid we are out of time. So thank you so much for sharing that, for your inspiring work in tech, and for your incredible work and purpose in taking tech to a village and building up their schools and creating a model for us to follow. If you are watching this session and have thoughts, questions or opinions, then please do post on the live social media wall with the hashtag ABLFcity. And of course, remember that if you missed the beginning or middle of this session, or just want to rewatch it, or any other session from today or the previous ABLF sessions, you can absolutely do so by coming back to the platform tomorrow, and all the sessions will be available and uploaded. So Sridhar, thank you once again, and thank you to everybody for joining us today. Remember that we are back every month featuring global leaders in powerful conversations.